Hello and welcome to TWWork, a space where you can hear and read about some amazing people, the fantastic jobs they do and the paths that led them to where they are today. Hello and welcome to break room number, I'm going to say 6. I am just about to nip across the road to my fantastic neighbours called Jim and Janet, or Janet and Jim, whichever way you want to say it. And they are, as I'm probably going to repeat in front of them, the least retired people I know. And they are just wonderful and really interesting people. And when I had this thought a while ago that I really wanted to chat through their careers, because they've both done a lot of interesting stuff. And I've had to really convince them to do it. So I'm about to go across the road with alcohol, flowers, cakes, and hopefully get them to chat to me. Wish me luck. I wanted to sit down with you tonight because you are probably the least retired people I think I've ever come across. As in the sense that...
You mean of our age?
We don't play golf and walk the dog.
Well, no, you're the least retired people. Is that the right way to describe it then? The least retired people I think I've ever met. Well, you're really busy anyway, which is fine, but it's more the fact that you're still quite involved in work, aren't you?
Yeah, from time to time.
From time to time. Because I really wanted to get both of yours take on the working world as it is now versus good and bad when you were younger, and I guess shifts that you've seen, because I think it's so interesting. The various chats that we've had, I guess, in my 2 years with you. You observe a lot and you guys know a lot, so I guess I thought it'd be really helpful and interesting to just get that alternative take on modern working life.
I think I don't know very much about the modern working life, but one stable thing when I started work was that there were some companies, some institutions that you sought to join them, and that would be you for life.
Yeah.
A job for life.
And was that very much your attitude going into work? Oh, you were trying to find... So when you first... Because you both are degree educated, aren't you?
Yes.
I think...
Which even for your generation, was that quite normal?
I don't think so. I think, there were jobs for life. I think it depended where you were on the job ladder. I think as graduates, as degree educated people, then it wasn't necessarily. It was do a job.
Just
and
a first job?
Yes.
And not quite
and you
knowing.
might stay there, but it would be quite sort of normal to leave.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas maybe if you were working for the Ford plant in Dagenham down the road from where I was,
more sort of manual labour kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe that would be you work at the Ford and that's it. Whereas in my situation, if I'd had a job, gone to work for Ford, then it would not necessarily have been for life.
Yeah.
Yes, whereas I do think now it seems to be much more...
Chop and change.
Yes, and it's not expected. I mean, I think even if you were looking to move on back then, I think you would probably want to maybe stay longer than people sometimes seem to today.
Yeah.
And if you left within 2 years, that would be quite short.
So both of your first jobs, how long did you stay there?
Oh, well, that's another question. I mean, for me...
So you'd been 21?
Yes, so for me, what governed my jobs was the fact that I took up with Jim.
Oh, Jim.
And he moved around with his job.
Jim.
So I moved too. So I was probably... I didn't spend much more than 2 years in any job between 75 and 89.
When you got your first job, what was your perception of how long you would stay there then?
I was looking for a career when we joined, there were 40 graduates in my year in my particular part of the business, which is quite a lot. There were 200 in total. And BP got the pick of the crop because it paid good money and had good prospects. But they also ran you through selection processes to see who were going to be the people who would succeed. And then they nurtured that crop at the top.
Yeah.
Which was fun.
That is fun. So then, I mean, luckily for you, I'm going to say here, you obviously found a very flexible lady, didn't you? Because let's face it, that wouldn't have been a lot of people's choice, would it, to have been that flexible and that might...
I think things are slightly different back then, but for me the overriding thing was that he was earning twice as much as me, so it made no sense. Say, well,
no, but you could have gone, look, I really like you.
I was tempted by
travel
I moved to Aberdeen.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't say no? Especially when we first met. There was the talk that, I'm going to be in Aberdeen, and then we're going to Alaska. And I thought that sounded very exciting.
Oh, you fed her a line, did you?
And you probably believed it at the time, but in actual fact, having moved to Aberdeen, we then got sent to Dorset, which wasn't quite as exciting as Alaska, but there you go.
Okay, so you got your job at BP then. Do you remember having any thoughts about how long you would be there for, or it was just a job, or what were you...
I quite looked forward to advancing in BP because BP was quite an exciting company.
Yeah.
It was a worldwide oil company. It had operations all over the world in some very strange places. And I kind of looked forward to maybe travelling with BP and seeing a bit of the world.
You saw no reason to ever... I guess it's that kind of job that actually could offer you a lot of change and a lot of versatility.
Very much so.
And it did.
It certainly did, yes.
Yeah.
The 17 years I was in, 10 different locations.
Wow.
I only went overseas with them once to work, which was San Francisco, which was very acceptable.
Very acceptable.
And
but you have no concept of what BP's like now, though, other than...
Not really, no. I've been out of there for 30 years.
Okay, but that industry, though, do you have any idea, I guess, is it still from a recruitment perspective? Do they still recruit the cream of the crop? Is that still... Because I'm guessing if they still got the weight that they used to have, or...
I think there are a lot of competing disciplines now. We would join them because we were engineers and we were the elite. Now I think there is a lot more people go into IT and social media qualifications than engineering.
Yeah. But the engineering's got to still happen because that's all...
BP,
or is it robot and tech-based now? I don't know.
BP doesn't do any engineering anymore. We used to have our own engineering group, several hundred strong. And then in the operations, you would need an engineering qualification to understand how everything worked. But one of the things that BP stopped doing shortly before I left was that it stopped doing its own engineering.
And outsourced it?
It outsourced it.
Oh, yes, I remember you telling me this, yeah. So the companies that you're still involved in today, that you have sort of personal stakes in, do you know much about how they operate and run?
They're very different companies, very small.
Yeah.
And yes, I know how they work. And
from an employee, I guess I'm sort of saying from an employee and staff.
Yes, they tend to have a planning and strategic and management element, and then the labour at the bottom is a lot more casual.
Yeah.
And you have to buy in the market. It turns over quite quickly, and if a large construction job starts up, everybody is competing for the people.
Yeah.
Nobody trains their own folk anymore. Nobody owns their own labour force. So if I look at large house building companies, for example, they don't employ people.
It's all contractual.
But particularly they don't train them. So they tend to be self-employed or small company, and they move from job to job, and they'll go where the money is.
Yeah.
And if the money is better on a Thursday somewhere else than on a Wednesday, they will drop tools and they'll go. So that, I think, is a shame. I would much rather employ people, train them, keep them on, pay them well. So one of the things I did learn, if you're in the service industry and you need to attract people, you need to find out what it is that attracts them to you. And so if a company has a personality, you market that personality rather than how much you pay. And that personality attracts folk to come to you and to stay to you. And so you need to market the fact that you are a good company to work for, that you're reliable, that you're long-term, you have lots of work, and that people can advance there.
And that you've got a good product, and that it's so
Yes.
you're kind of proud to be working for the company.
Yes, you need to have your accolades.
What
But
did
it's
it-
not the money.
But do you think that's the case now, though?
Don't know.
Because my take on what I know from, I guess, having been doing this for a year, and I guess a lot of my social feed is about young people and careers and even people my age, that kind of thing. There doesn't seem to be any loyalty. Even, I mean, don't get me wrong, job descriptions now are full of, almost, it's not selling, it's selling a culture is the thing now. It's really selling the culture and, free fruit. And I mean, it can be really random what the culture is, but it's really selling a culture because I think I said this to you, didn't I, or privately a couple of weeks ago, like the days of pension schemes and bonus, anything like that are just non-existent now. It's like because people don't stay, and I think employers cannot get what you've described in terms of the headhunting phenomenon. It seems to be, and obviously people can quite easily chime in at this point and tell me I'm wrong, but people are very much about career progression, whether or not they're at the level to do the job. And I think a lot of people have progressed in industry and business far quicker than they probably should have.
Yeah, I call that wage progression, not career progression.
Yeah.
It means that business is much less stable than you would want it to be, either inside the business or the national economy. I have the impression that still in Central Europe, Germany particularly, people still work for companies for a long period and are progressed there.
Oh, interesting.
I think they're going the same way as we have. But if one wants to create a company anywhere, then you have got to attract people to its culture. And hopefully it's not just giving away Smarties on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
But you figure out what it is that's going to attract them. We always used to think about what were the giveaways, whether it's a company car or a pension or a medical insurance.
Yeah, bonuses.
And we would go with what was most popular with people rather than what cost most.
Yeah.
Because most people didn't realise what the respective costs of those things were, but they wanted a pension and they wanted a medical insurance more than a company car typically, despite the company car costing more. Expectations these days are more about lifestyle than career. Career was something where it was valuable to you and you felt that you were doing something useful for the world. And I think now we're talking a lot more about expectations that you've learned on social media.
Well, it's a job to get you the life you want.
Yes.
Lifestyle.
Yes,
Yeah.
but actually, when you're doing that 7 days a week, if you're not enjoying it and if you're not engaged
young
in it...
people really think that now. They will just, and if the whole work-life, definitely since COVID as well, work-life balance. Because I know we had this chat off before as well, don't we? Like, there's a whole generation of people that started working during COVID and didn't know how to go to work in an office.
Well, yes.
And we're not fully out of that because obviously that model is shifting radically, but people, I mean, I know young people that have left jobs because they wanted them in, I think, was it 3 days a week or 4 days a week? And they're like, I don't want to do that, I'm not doing that.
And why didn't they want to do that?
Because they want to work from home. They want to be able to go and do their yoga class. They want to be able to go and they want to have time at home. They do not feel the need. And the problem is companies are really struggling to tell them why they need to go into an office. Other than human connection, with tech as it is now, you don't actually need to go into an office. There isn't really a reason.
Human connection, I think, is...
But they're not. But the businesses aren't saying that, though.
But you're kind of establishing that connection. You're weighing people up. You're seeing who's good at this, who's good at that, how that person operates. So when you are remote, you know how to judge it. Whereas I think if you just have that initial, even though you can see someone, you don't get all the little minutiae.
You don't get to know anyone, do you?
There's one judgment that I think is very important. Being in the office, you get to know who the tossers are.
Yes.
When you tend to talk to, well, these are the relationships I'm forming and this is who can help me with this. But there's that dark side that says, oh, and these are the people who don't contribute anything. And if you don't know that, then in your secluded environment at home,
you might start thinking that, and maybe you talk to someone else about it. But actually, if you're in the office, there's 3 of you, and that person, is obviously being a tosser, then the other 2 people, all you need to do, you look at one another, and there's a raised eyebrow, and you both know that you're both thinking.
Yeah, which you can't do that online.
And you can't do that online. And
you'd have to send a specific message about it.
Yes, and that is very difficult. And there's little human interactions I think are just so important.
But it's
and not to have that, it almost becomes presumably self-fulfilling that I can't do it, I won't do it, no.
Well, or the unhappy, or people aren't happy in their jobs because they're not getting that connection.
Yes.
And therefore they're just blaming the job on the fact they're not happy, so they just keep moving, they're looking for happiness.
Yes,
but
I don't think people have enough understanding of how human interaction, that humans generally do need to interact with people, and it's nothing tangible, but it's just saying hello to somebody in the lift or something.
But there's the social side of work.
Yes.
And there was always a social side wherever we worked, whether you're going to the pub or out to dinner or having people from work home for dinner, things like that, where you build up a relationship and you actually meet people and they get together and get married at work. But that doesn't happen anymore.
No, you can't have office banter, can you?
Well, I don't know. Do you know, I think it's going to be really interesting because I think businesses are only really cracking down now and, making it like you've got. I don't think they ever do 4, but it's definitely 3 days. Some businesses make it 4 days.
See, Asda yesterday said, no, everybody's coming back into the office. They work for us.
5 days?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you're not going to see the fallout of that for probably another couple of years.
Well, they are going for redundancies as well, so that'll help.
Right. Wow. So I guess if you were to do it all again, now in the world that we are in, I've got to ask both of you this separately. You have got to imagine yourself as sort of 21, 24, whatever age you want to be, but starting out. How do you think you would even remotely approach it all? Would you do things differently, the same?
What amazes me these days is how difficult it is to actually get a job. I say, when I was applying, you put your name and your O-levels, your A-levels and a degree and a little bit of, in a small box about your hobbies and maybe what you wanted to do. And that was it. Now you have personal statements, you go for an interview for a job at McDonald's and it takes half a day because you're...
Got to go to an assessment centre.
Assessments, all this. I just think I would just be in the corner going, no, can't do it.
Do you think say you were 18-year-old Janet now though? What do you think you would do? Would you still go to uni?
Knowing what you know now.
Fully knowing what you know now.
That's an impossible thing, isn't it? Because knowing what I know now, yes, I would.
You would go to uni. What would you do?
What would I do? I would do something more technical, I think.
But knowing that that universities cost a lot of money and everything else, would you still definitely go?
They do and they don't. I mean, I think this whole thing of student debt is a bit nuance anyway, because you don't pay it back unless you earn the money.
Yep.
So most debts get written off.
And so if you were 24 now,
Social housing.
what would be the industry? What would you do? Do you think you'd still go and do civil engineering? I guess it's probably, would you do a different degree?
I would make things, build things, and the way I am now, with my 70-year-old brain and the stage of the company, if it were now and I were 24, I would very much like to develop social housing of a possibly politics.
Possibly politics, possibly
I'm
government.
not sure.
I think both of you could have done something like that, because you're saying that you need to find...
People say this to me, and I know
You're an imposter.
But
remember?
no,
I don't know anything,
You've
and I
already
can't
said
string
you
two words
need a
together.
greater good. You've said that.
Well,
you
yes.
need to believe in something bigger than yourself.
Yes, so I could be in the back office doing the
Okay,
research.
that's fine. You don't have to be up front, but you could be badass, as the kids say in the back, kind of like making it all happen, couldn't you?
Maybe. It's one of those little things you pick up through your career. I mean, I remember my first job in the library, we were always told, if the phone rings and you've got a queue of people coming in, let the phone ring.
Yeah.
And it really bugs me to this day when I go somewhere and I'm talking to someone, the phone rings and they say, oh, excuse me, I'll just get this. I think, no, I'm here talking to you.
Interesting.
Yeah. And plus the other thing, when emails first came out, it was like, never put anything in an email that you wouldn't say to someone face to face. And I think people don't, email or any text sort of message, would you say this to someone's face? Or would you say this to or on the phone or whatever? And if you
I
wouldn't...
think that can work both ways, though. I think you'll often say you can sometimes be a bit more honest, and actually an email, what you might have kind of considered things, it can work both ways now.
Yes, but I think people, there is a tendency to, someone comes in, you fire up a quick response email, and it, it's terse, it's slightly rude or whatever. Whereas if you wouldn't say that to someone. You've only got to look at Twitter. People, people post things that you think, really? Do you think that's something you should be saying?
I think in both cases, face-to-face or written communication, you should, if you're face-to-face, you should be honest.
Yes.
And if you're writing it down, then you shouldn't say anything that you wouldn't say face-to-face.
And the whole thing about not face-to-face is that it's that one step removed, so there is that slight detachment, and you feel that you can be a little more...
Well, your emails are probably a bad analogy of
whatever.
that, but on social, you're talking about Twitter and stuff, aren't you? People definitely feel that they can just, because they're detached, they can say whatever they want to say.
Yes. Okay, in an email you're not anonymous, but the further you get from that face-to-face thing, I think
we become
less
ruder.
polite you are. Yeah. And then obviously then how does that land? What are you hoping to get out of this interchange?
I think maybe the working from home means that you only ever communicate with people remotely.
If there was one bit of advice you could give your younger self, if it doesn't have to be one, that sounds quite mean now, but if you were confronted with your younger self, and it can be any version of you, what do you think, what advice would you give?
Oh, you go first, I'll think of
I find that very hard, because it's a question that I have thought of before. It comes up. I actually don't know. I mean, I would say, be more confident, but that's kind of difficult. No,
Do you have any regrets about anything you'd wish you'd done that you haven't done?
No, because I think it's silly having regrets, because if you think, I had a choice here, I could have gone that way, I went that way, maybe I should have gone that way. If you've gone that way, who knows?
You're definitely not
and actually, by going that way, this happened and that wouldn't have happened. I don't think you should regret anything, really. I suppose regret the things you haven't done rather than the things you have done. Maybe. Don't think, I better not do that. Do it.
Well, maybe because sometimes the advice that people say is things like, just trust the process. It sounds, that kind of whole thing of whatever your journey is going to be, it's going to be it. So just go with it.
I'd say rather than trust the process, my advice would be to know that you will succeed. So something about confidence and something
Having
about
faith in
a good outcome. Because I think that if I were talking to myself back then, I was not confident and I didn't know where I was going and didn't know I would get there. So to get that from my older self would probably...
But
if you
it's
knew
kind
that-
of not advice you can give. You can't advise someone and say, "Oh, well, be confident." So don't worry about this, that, and the other, because you can't help.
But if you knew, I guess, but you say that, but a lot of people do say that to them. When I ask this question to everybody, and they'll do say it's all going to be okay. It's that whole thing of it's going to be okay.
Yes.
You'd want to really reassure. So if your older self, when you were young, if your older self came to you and said it is going to be absolutely fine, and
But
it
for
was
some
your
people-
older self,
but
therefore
then-
you knew that it was going
So
to be
you know
fine.
it's true.
Well,
You know it's true.
Yes, but that's...
What would you do differently? How would that change? But then how would that have changed?
But it can't change, can it? Because you do what your
Well,
character...
you're back to Doctor Who now.
You're talking
saying,
about
well, you
chicken and
can't
the egg
change
now,
the,
aren't you? Yeah.
Yes, you can't...
Which is why the question is...
Okay, here's one thing I do wonder about. When we moved to Scotland...
It's just going to be quite personal and specific.
No, in 89, we bought a house, a really nice house. I could show you the sales brochure, it looks lovely. And it was...
89?
No, it's 80.
80.
80,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
80, we bought a house, a lovely house, lovely situation, but it was 20 miles outside Aberdeen, a mile off the road, up a farm track. So it was pretty isolated.
Was it haunted?
No, only by bats.
Sorry,
but
that
we
was
don't
the
talk
only
about
one
those.
going.
Allegedly.
Allegedly by bats. And it was great. We were there for 25 years. We had it for, did we? I don't know.
We owned it for
We owned it,
25
yes.
years.
We lived there quite a lot of that. That's all it. But it was a long way from anyone. People didn't drop by. Now, I sometimes wonder, had we lived in Aberdeen, in town, where, everything's on your doorstep, people can come by, you can go and visit, would our social life have been different? Friendship groups, blah, 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 blah.
Okay, bit of a weird way to end one of my podcasts because I normally just thank my guest and they thank me back, which is lovely. But the Jim and Janet chat ended because we were talking about something a bit weird. And so the last words I say before shutting it down are, well, that was a weird way to end, but there we go. And obviously, I'm not going to include the last bit that we were chatting about, so therefore I can't include the ending. So I'm doing a bit of a voiceover to kind of improvise. But needless to say, the chat was so much longer and so much richer than I've released. I mean, we chatted for 2.5 hours. We talked about politics, we talked about religion, we talked about cults. Cults came up a few times, Scientology particularly, but even workplace cults and indoctrination, that kind of thing. So, yeah, a lot was discussed. And to be honest, I haven't included it because, I'm not going to include it. However, I guess I just wanted to kind of reiterate my big takeout from the chat with Jim and Janet. And I think, to be honest, I'm going to have more than one chat with them because they are such an unbelievable font of knowledge, not least about cults. Don't worry, they've never been in a cult. That sounds bad. But the biggest takeout I had from the chat with them was about connectivity and how they perceive the working world today and how disconnected it is. And I hope that came across in some of what they said. But if it didn't, I guess that's why I wanted to fill in the gaps a little bit, because, they come from an era where everything was done face to face, everything was done person to person. And now we're coming out of an era of fully remote working and we're still kind of in an era of hybrid working. But even then, just our social connectivity and how, we communicate with people via phones and devices so much more, I say than they ever did. They never did it when they were younger. And I guess how odd they think that is and how worrying they think it is, because they genuinely believe that a lot is lost in that human connection, not least in the workplace and people's I guess, connection to where they work, which, can have a real impact on how happy someone is at work. And I think I would love to have a bigger chat about that. I think it probably needs to be a more diverse age group chat about that. And I would love Jim and Janet to be in it. But I think, we talk in the chat about how loyalty just really isn't anything anymore. Jobs for life, it's all gone, which I know is not news. But I guess the big sort of takeout from that as well is that people don't stay anywhere long enough to get connected to anything or to any people. And they don't feel massively connected to where they work anymore. Whereas when Jim and Janet were younger, they did feel really connected to where they worked and what they were doing. So it's one of those sort of chicken and egg scenarios, really, isn't it? It's like, how do we get people to reconnect with their place of work and their colleagues and the people they work with? Or do we not have to? And I guess that's raised a big question for me, which I haven't answered, but I'd like to answer in these break room chats. But for now, I just wanted to waffle on for a little bit to I guess, close down how that break room chat went, and I guess tee up a next chat. So at this point, I'm simply going to say thank you very much to Jim and Janet, and thank you very much to you for listening. If you would like to hear more about this chat, see some pics and read about how to get started in this industry and/or this role, then please go to our website www.TWWork.org. The link is in this podcast page and across our socials. Sincere thanks.